Good morning, everybody. You're all very welcome to another programme with us, Social Rights Ireland, in conjunction with the Peadar O'Donnell Socialist Republican Forum. This morning, we are very pleased to welcome Dr. Ranjeet Brar, who is based in England at this moment in time and who has actually been suspended from his job, which is probably why you're able to join us at this time of the morning, Ranjeet. The conversation title for this morning is Political Repression in Britain and the IHRA definition of anti-Semitism. And the reason for that title is because this week a video has gone viral of Dr. Ranjeet Brar being arrested in his own home. And a lot of people have now taken an interest in you personally, Ranjeet, but also healthcare workers and other workers are looking closely at how this unfolds and develops for you, because as workers, we all fear that the IHRA could be thrown at us as a weapon to silence us. So maybe you'd talk to us, first of all, about that scenario. We saw you in your kitchen dealing with two lackeys, as they referred to themselves as, actually, whenever you were arrested, and what happened as a result when you were taken to jail, because that bit we didn't see when you were in prison, and then what led actually in the first place to this arrest. And it's not the first arrest.
So good morning, Roisin. Good morning to you all. Thanks so much for inviting me on and for speaking to me. Yeah, well, maybe we'll start with the surface appearances, because it's a good place to start. So yeah, that video was interesting. I was off for a week. It was 2 weeks ago now. I was off for a week because I'm a surgeon. So I'm a vascular surgeon. I work at quite a busy, large London teaching hospital. My wife's a surgeon as well. She's a breast oncoplastic surgeon at a different large London teaching hospital. We're generally pretty busy. We're not at home all the time. We've got 3 kids, so we do actually we have a nanny. We have live in or a permanent childcare so that we can work. But my nanny has relatives in Nigeria. She went away. So I was booked off for that week. So I was at home looking after the kids. It was Easter half term. I went to drop one of my sons, my middle son. They played basketball at a basketball camp. And while I walked out onto the drive, 2 policemen were walking across the road towards me. And I could see that they were heading for me, and they kind of put their hand on my arm and said, "Are you Ranjeet Brar?" And there's a bit of me that wanted to say, "No, no, you must have the wrong person." But they obviously knew who they were looking for. Um, so yeah, I am. Said, "Oh, we need to speak to you." I said, "Oh, well, can I drop my son at basketball?" And believe it or not, they said yes. So I was like, "Oh, okay." They're not very determined policemen. So I took my son, I dropped him at his basketball game and came back. And then they came back in the house. And then, in that time, I got my son. We got my son's phone, and we filmed them. I wanted some record of what they wanted. And then that video, if you've seen it, kind of speaks for itself. They had been sent essentially to arrest me for what they said, or a police adjudicator had told them was a Public Order Act Section 18 offence. And that's speaking words and behaviour what is likely to cause to arouse racially inflamed tension. So basically inciting racial hatred. They said I'd made a speech which incited racial hatred, so they're arresting me as a racist. And the speech they're referring to, I made a week previous to that. It was at the US Embassy, and that's also on my social media. And I think maybe parts of it are on yours. It's kind of quite widespread as well. And there was nothing remarkable about that speech from my point of view. It was like a 10, 12, 15-minute speech. I was invited to speak at the Palestine encampment in Nine Elms in London, opposite the US Embassy. US Embassy is like a fortress. It's bomb-proof. They've got missile encampments on the roof. They've got a system of moats and ditches and buttresses. They've got a big underground complex, and the whole area was redesigned when they moved the embassy there precisely so it could be a high security zone. So it's not as if they're under any threat from us. In fact, when I turned up on that day, the police were there in numbers within the complex, helping the Palavist monarchists to unpack their kind of counter demonstration, because the event I was asked to speak at was opposite at the Palestine encampment. Palestine encampment's been a presence since this genocide in Gaza started, so 2.5 years. There have been people who permanently man it in protest at the genocide in Gaza. But this particular event was in connection with the Iran war, which was then ongoing. And in particular, it was a memorial event for the school children of Manab, 186 children who were massacred deliberately in a double tap Tomahawk cruise missile strike on a small girls' school, predominantly girls, actually children's school. And we now know, that there are US intelligence operatives who've come out and told us not only that it was terrorism, not only that they're, by their own definitions of terrorism, US state-sponsored terrorism, that they knew that it was a school. It was impossible to miss from the satellite data and footage. It was covered in children's murals and children coming and going, and it very obviously been identified as such. It wasn't a mistake. And that the cruise missiles themselves are fitted with monitoring data, so they get live streamed video, very accurate video of the strike, and they could see again it was a girls' school from the first cruise missile. Children were taken to a safe space in a prayer room. it's it's amazing to think about it makes me emotional actually just to think about the cold-hearted, the cold-blooded nature of the killing, because then they sent another cruise missile directly into the prayer room and incinerated these children and their teachers. And we've had US intelligence operatives who are ashamed of what's happened, who have come out and said, this is the definition of terrorism, this is the deliberate act. We had live stream footage. And we've had other operatives who said the reason why they've done it. The reason they did it was because it was the children of the IRGC, so the children of the Iranian military. And this was a message that, this is a no holds barred strike. Like Trump's tweet, we're going to destroy your civilization. We're going to bomb you into the Stone Age. Reminds me of, I don't know if you've ever seen Avatar. Have you ever seen Avatar, the movie? The attitude of these corporate people who are after this, some ridiculous element they made up, unobtainium or something. But when they're talking about fighting the Na'vi, so we're going to make a hole so big in their racial memory they'll never recover. And this is the corporate, voice of the colonizers. This is the corporate voice of US imperialism. So we will hit you so hard, we will wipe out your children. That's what we're talking about. So I made a speech at an event as a memorial to this attack. My speech was mainly directed at US imperialism. I said, this is an aggressive war. This is an illegal war. This is state-sponsored war criminal activity. And openly, it's clearly as such. Our government, Starmer government, is involved in this. And the Labour government are a government of war criminals and genociders involved in Palestine for 2 years. Anyone who lends them their support is a war criminal. And yet the Labour government run in Britain our anti-war movement and our workers' resistance movements and our unions. And can you imagine in World War II, can you imagine the Nazi party running the resistance, running the anti-war party? So they're running the war, they're running the genocides, they're running the concentration camp, and they're also running the resistance. And if that seems like a logical incongruity, why do we tolerate that in Britain? And in fact, isn't that the secret of why our resistance to our own ruling class is so ineffective and why we're such passive slaves? I think this is the message that they're very angry and upset about. I said, so what do we need to do? We need to break the Labour Party in every way, break their link to the working class movement in Britain. Number one, we need to eject US troops from our country, eject US bases from our country. This war is being carried out from our bases, from Fairford, which is near Gloucestershire in Britain, from Diego Garcia, an illegally occupied part of Mauritius. The Indian Ocean territory was hived off precisely in order to have this string of global bases. That was the US and British plan after World War II. And sure enough, we are directing these illegal bombings, these genocidal bombings from there. From Akrotiri in Cyprus, where we have been giving live stream data to direct the genocide in Gaza. We need to eject all US forces from British bases. We need to leave NATO. We need to eject and close the US embassy. We need to eject and close the Israeli embassy. The things that are so far outside the normal discourse that they're not allowed to be said. And I said, Israel should fall as a genocidal settler colonial state. the extent of its crimes are such it can't continue. I think this concept of a two-state solution is finished. It's clear when the Israelis murdered their own prime minister for making peace accords, in the 1990s with Arafat and the PLO. They very clearly said, we're not accepting a two-state solution. We're going to have a one-state solution. Their one-state solution is Israel. That's why, Netanyahu goes to the UN and he holds up a picture of the whole of Palestine. It's just called Israel, and no one has a problem with that. But and what did he do? He wiped Palestine off the face of the map. That's precisely their intention. Eretz Israel is just that. Wipe Palestine off the face of the map. Uh, uh, um, you know, a loyal Jewish Ulster in the sea of potentially hostile Arabism, to quote Ronald Storrs. That's what it's meant to be. That's what it functions as. The only response to that can say, no, we want a single state solution that's Palestine, democratic, secular, inclusive state without this supremacist Zionism. And those supremacist Zionists who can't live with that will obviously have to leave. I think that's the considered position of my party. Those were the things I said in that speech. I think to come back to, I made that speech, I went home and I didn't think too much about it. We put it online, but it was picked up by some particularly rabid Zionists. What we've seen as a feature of our political policing in Britain, and I've seen this because I've been arrested now 5 times, believe it or not, over similar kind of questions, is that the Zionist activist groups who have themselves deep links to the Israeli military and the Israeli state, as well as the British military and the British state and the British government and the British police, are being used on the streets at our demonstrations, but also to police our social media. And so these people pick up and search for things that they find objectionable, and they try and fit it into a framework of illegality or in some way to make a complaint to your employer. So they go for your employer, they go for the state and the police, and they try and make trouble for pro-Palestine activists. And that's basically what we saw. So there's a website called, in this instance, called Habibi UK. Habibi is a lovely word, Arabic word. My love, my darling, my friend. It has a kind of variety of meanings, but it's used tongue-in-cheek by the Zionists in their offensive, racist way. Habibi UK. They're anti-Arab racists, and this is a pure Zionist site. They go around and they just find loads of Palestine activities, try and identify the people and try and create problems for them. And they identified that I was a doctor at a hospital. And I'm not going to mention the name of the hospital because this seems to be the thing that they're able to use and leverage against you. Say, oh, you identified yourself. I said, I didn't identify myself as anything. So no, but you retweeted this tweet from this person who identified you. So you identified yourself. I said, oh, wow. But anyway, so they try and identify your place of work and target you there. And your place of work is then brought under pressure. So they did that. Habibi UK, they managed to get, in a way, I'm quite grateful to them. Obviously, they're showing a selective crowd of like quite right wing. It's a bit like Tommy Robinson supporters if you look down the comments, but it's broader than that. So they managed to take a clip of the video, reasonable size clip, with a few quotes and show it to, I don't know, a couple of 100,000 people. And then off the back of that, the next day, Julia Hartley Brewer, I don't know if you know this person. She's a kind of extreme right wing, rabid Rupert Murdoch sponsored talk show host, but she's given very wide currency in Britain. She picked up on it and made a big thing out of it. And then this doctor should be struck off. How can we have this hate merchant speaking? So, to speak against genocide, speak against war, to speak against these illegal war crimes, that's hatred. And yet we see the converse, the side of that is that we have people who are openly fighting the IDF, thousands, perhaps 2,000 who are fighting the IDF, who come back to Britain and get on with their normal lives. I know that one of them is a priest at Sheffield University. He's come back and apparently he's perfectly okay for him to tend to the moral responsibility and welfare of the student body at Sheffield. But to speak against war, no, I must be prevented from operating on my patients. My patients must have their operations cancelled. My clinic patients must have their clinic appointments cancelled. I just shouldn't be allowed. It's temporary. It's temporary. But look at their professed values and what they do. So yeah, so that was basically how it happened. And then they did manage to, and essentially, it clearly has the hallmarks of high levels of government. I've got a persistent campaign now against Wes Streeting and his involvement with the Zionist lobby. I tried to deliver letters to him. I've been outside his constituency address. I've been involved with those who are campaigning against him locally in his Ilford constituency. So, it's quite clear that Wes Streeting reached out as the health minister to the chief executive of my hospital. And it's from there that the trouble comes in terms of my hospital. No other trouble at my hospital. It's purely directed by him. Otherwise, how can it be that on the Wednesday, I got a phone call saying I'm suspended? On the Thursday, I'm arrested and taken to jail. And then, after they took me to jail, long, they put me in a cell. Actually, the police, once I spoke to them, they're very embarrassed. You can see it's like a parody when you look at the video of the arrest. It's like a parody. They're very polite. They don't know what's going on. They're just doing their job. It's not for them to say, no, they totally understand, but they are just going to arrest you anyway. And, they won't let you make arrangements for childcare. They won't listen to you. So really, I'm not speaking to them, am I? I got my son to record it, and I'm kind of aware, well, sooner or later, I'm speaking to others. And at least we can use these events, this harassment for education purposes to open people's eyes to what's going on. What are the police being used for? Why are they being used like this? Why is it that to speak against genocide is being labeled as racist, and this is the time that's targeted? But if I walked in a Tommy Robinson demo and made a Nazi salute on the street, I'd just go home and nothing would happen. So I think that is the level at which this kind of arrest and harassment is useful. And I guess on a certain level, the enemy are doing our work for us. They're pushing our message, and they're pushing a wider unease. There's a deep unease in British society, and they're helping to demonstrate, exactly what's happening. There's a very long and kind of like circuitous answer to your very focused question. So maybe you want to direct me.
No, it's great to get that for context and to be reminded, but also to hear your analysis of what we saw as well. And I don't think it's an accident either, you were it was just picked up on social media, Ranjit. I don't think these things are just picked up accidentally. The media machine, as we know, is another tool of imperialism, and it's a very slick part of the whole apparatus, actually. So there's, these people who are being paid, actually. They don't stumble upon your and the fact that you're high profile. The fact that it also is that yourself, Ranjit, your party, Jyoti, say things that very clearly and very honestly, like no holds barred, talk about imperialism, address the root cause as well, and you're able to do that. Very loquaciously, actually, but very coherently. And I think that's the real danger. Sometimes, I would even find myself struggling to be so coherent. I know it in my head what imperialism is, but to be able to join the dots, and that by doing and by exposing even having the quick wit to and the foresight to record what happened. Like, did you ever anticipate even that there would be so much reaction to the video in your kitchen, and how necessary it is? We can talk the talk till the cows come home, but it's actually by doing and by showing and by illustrating. That's part of the practice. Theory is one thing, but putting it into practice and not being, an awful lot of people might be embarrassed, afraid, don't want their employer to see it. Is this going to make me look more guilty? So I think it's really important for all of us to continue to expose the reality. And I suppose that maybe there's something even more compelling about when we see a person that we can identify with, a father, a worker, a doctor, or, a kitchen, that made it even more powerful. But to go now to maybe to talk about another aspect to this, like as you were talking, I'm wondering which part of your speech offended the state most. Was it, talking about Iran and supporting Iran, or was it criticizing the Labour government? And is it even calling out what you said, the anti-war machine, which is also, it's like the controlled opposition. It's just, a fake opposition, really, a fake anti-war movement. So I wonder which part actually triggered the state to take this slow violent action. That's the other thing. I think sometimes people don't see it as violence, but it is violence. It's an attack on your right to free speech and coming into your home where your children are, your safe space, and also your ability to maintain that home and your family, your economic ability to continue, what you do, just as a parent to look after your family. So how do you think, like the IHRA definition has been adopted here, I think, in Ireland, or approved at least by the Dublin government, but how effective do you think it is as a stick to beat workers right now where you are in England?
Thanks, Roisin. So I think the thing that so Karl Marx said apropos the English church in capital that they'd more readily pardon an attack on 38 of their 39 articles of faith than they would on 1/39th of their income. That atheism itself is culpa levis and minor sin compared to the criticism of actually existing bourgeois property relations. And I think we have to always bear that in mind. What they don't want us to do is point out to working people that there's no reason for them to be poor. There's no reason for them to be oppressed. There's no reason for them to suffer. The wealth is all around them and arises from the natural resources of the earth and their own labor power, their own ability to work. All wealth comes from there. All our bourgeoisie have to do to keep wealthy, and what I'm talking about, the amount of wealth they have is unimaginable. We see poverty, we see workers in struggle, we see signs that things are getting worse, even in the heartlands of imperialism. They have unimaginable amounts of wealth. They have more wealth than they know what to do with. They have more wealth than they know what to do with. The land question in Britain, no one even thinks if you add up all of the housing area of every person's house. So there's like we've got a 67 million population. Put all of their houses together. It's less than 5% of the land surface area of the country. And there's still very few families, a few thousand individuals who basically own all the land in Britain. And then because they have so much capital, these are the same people who own the banking capital, the industrial capital, the major manufacturers. And of course, because they've exported capital, they have a controlling influence along with US capitalists in much of the world's affairs. That's why even as they're getting militarily weaker, as BRICS is rising, as imperialism is falling, they're still incredibly powerful and they're still incredibly dangerous. But so much of their wealth does come from the extraction of mineral wealth from the Middle East. 66% of the oil resources are from there. And that's why I think they were so down on Corbyn, even though he's really very tame, mild-mannered, left social democrat. They've had similar people like that in power before, and in a way it would have been sensible for them to have someone there, but they're in an economic crisis mode, and they can't have anyone who would in any way challenge their right to plunder the wealth of the world, and particularly this loot from the Middle East. They're keeping control of that region. And of course, then Israel, Bahrain, Kuwait, UAE, Saudi. These are unchallengeable pillars of their system of looting the Middle East, and particular Israel. And the Abraham Accords were meant to, bring them all essentially under their regional policeman, their key state, which remains Israel. So the protection of Israel goes to the heart of British imperial interests. But British are very good at hiding in plain sight. They always deny it. Even when they wanted Palestine after World War One, they didn't talk about the Sykes-Picot Treaty. It was the Soviet Union who published those secret treaties. That was the whole basis for World War One, was that they were going to carve up the empires of their rival states. Well, their rival states, the Germans in particular, the Austro-Hungarians wanted to steal their colonies. This is a battle for colonies, a battle for the slaves of the world, for the money of the world. So they just kind of said, oh, they acted in such a way that Palestine just fell into their hands, and pretended a kind of nonchalance. They're just there to kind of help the people come towards their own self-governing state of independence. It's a mandate for the protection of the colonies that have fallen from the defeated powers. But of course, they went about very actively implanting Jewish settler colonialism there. They did that with the Balfour Declaration, but they'd done that through the mandate. They did everything they can to create a framework for looting this vital area. And that's basically what's at the bottom of it. Now, if we fast forward through right to through the 1948, through the Nijl Nakba, through this latest 2 years of genocide, it's clear they desperately just want to keep hold of the Middle East. And our Labour government and our Conservative governments, the consecutive governments, have been, deeply strategically involved in making sure they maintain their grip. And so we've seen that Akrotiri base literally RAF have been flying flights over Gaza around and around and around, streaming information directly to the Israelis, who then use their AI systems to pick out targets and cause the genocide. So they're not prepared. They're not prepared in any way for anyone to question. And it's for this reason that there's increasing repression in Britain. We've never seen such a large anti-imperialist movement. It dwarfs the movement at the time of the Gulf War. We've had 30 years of wars in the Middle East. And the biggest demonstrations that we're told to look back to were the time of 2003, the second, Gulf War, when Tony Blair went and destroyed Iraq. And perhaps a million, maybe 1.5 million, maybe even 2 million people marched, but they went home again. And really, the movement was crushed very quickly. It was crushed with compliant leadership linked to the Labour Party. And so the Labour Party, the left-wing Labour Party people, the Tony Benns, the Jeremy Corbyns that we're all told are the gurus of the left, they control these movements, the C&D, the Stop the War, and they just march you up, march you down, send you home, and that's the end of it, and make noises and crush resistance. And to be honest, even the official PSC in Britain is very much like that, linked to the Labour Party. And all kinds of now, we're seeing something different. We've seen 9 or 10 million people march on the streets persistently over that period of time. We've seen that our government has come together to think very carefully, how can we crush that resistance through legal measures, through putting false leadership in this sphere, through physically attacking, marginalizing, criminalizing, and taking away the work rights of people who are very active in the movement, through working in conjunction with Israeli state, British state forces to really criminalize the movement. And that's an overall process of a many-pronged attack. But you can see it, you can see it. When I first was, this arrest has just happened now. So 2026, when it was March 2026, April 2026. I've been arrested 5 times, 2 times at the beginning of this genocide. I was in November 2023 at a demonstration. I was arrested for selling a book on Zionism, because the Zionists were working as political police within a demonstrator, picking up the book, showing them to the police, and gradually getting the police to agree to arrest you and go down that process. A few weeks later, my comrades were giving out a leaflet, which was supporting it said, victory to the Palestinian people in their just war for liberation. This is terrorism because it's supporting a prescribed organization. The accusation was that was Hamas. Now, that leaflet didn't mention any group whatsoever. So, resistance is resistance. The right of the resistance of the Palestinian people, including by armed struggle, is a point of international law. It's embodied in many UN resolutions. But of course, global politics changes, the balance of forces changes, and imperialism is on the offensive. So they want to roll that back. And how do they do it? They've literally taken organization, and the pen of the Home Secretary writes it on a piece of paper, and that organization is banned. And from that point on, to mention that organization in a positive way is to canvass support for it. It's punishable by 14 years in prison. And they've done that not only with many resistance groups and resistance movements, who, despite being legal in international law and having a right to resist in international law, including at UN, in British domestic law, become illegal. So to support them is punishable in this way. But they've done it even, obviously, as we've seen, to Palestine Action, to civil disobedience and direct action groups trying to stop a genocide. So the level of joined up thinking, other prongs of this, we saw Michael Gove, particularly after my arrest. We're a small group. We are ignored. We are marginalized. Our message is considered far outside what is acceptable. And the tactic has always been to pretend we don't exist. Very occasionally you find some spokesman on a radio show will mention us, and very quickly they'll shut it down. And it's kind of well understood across the imperialist media space. You don't mention us. Don't mention us. In fact, I was quite surprised with my last arrest. They did mention the name of our party. I think they thought they were in a strong position to try and to criminalize it, or maybe make some negative. But it's a mistake. The more they push our name into the public eye, the more people will come to us, and they are coming to us. But what they did at that time, Michael Gove, so just before the election of the new Labour government, Michael Gove came out of nowhere because he's a kind of backdoor minister, very, again, closely linked to the Zionists, closely linked to all, to Boris Johnson, to all of the different factions of the Tory party and the ruling class, really. But he came out and he suddenly made a statement talking specifically about 3 controlled opposition groups that he disagreed with them and they were anti-Semites. This was just after my arrest, after our we were kind of gaining a lot of traction in various places. And he specifically named the Socialist Workers' Party, SWP, the Socialist Party, and a new group called the Revolutionary Communist Party, who literally didn't exist until a couple of weeks before he made that announcement. So why he would pick them out as the people don't go to these, so it's like so an average British kid watching it could probably recognize that Michael Gove is not a good guy, is like the enemy or is the ruling class guy. And if he's saying these people are the enemy, it's like a signpost. This is the official opposition. You may inquire online about these people. They've been heavily promoted in algorithms. So the tactics they use from promoting these false opposition, overwhelmingly Trotskyites, of different factions who we know for years have been closely linked to the state in all kinds of ways, and whose leadership are riddled with just standard bourgeois Western academic Marxists, i.e., people who basically preserve the paradigm of Western liberal values, democracy. They're Guardian readers, they're left Labour milieu. So it's promoting Labour and their associated groups as the official leadership, number one. Number two, increasing repression of British workers, stopping demonstrations. Mark Rowley, our chief of police, made a statement not too long ago, I think in January, in which he went to the Board of Deputies and said, we have put unprecedented restrictions that we've never used before on the right to protest on these demonstrations. So they want to stop the demonstrations, reduce their frequency, and distract them. So inject heavy amount of racism into the British working class movement, and then have kind of liberalish, anti-racist demonstrations. So again, you factionalize, you marginalize, you make people argue, you do everything you can to decrease the power, and you physically attack those who give the wrong message. You repress them at work and repress them through legal measures, and this really has been their overall game plan. So it's the whole message of that speech. Israel is like marginal, but it's what they can hang their oppression on, the IHRA definition, and they found it extremely useful precisely because that is a definition which is designed and set up to conflate criticism of Israel with criticism of Jews, and therefore to say criticism of Israel's actions, genocide, foreign policy is racist, anti-Semitic, and therefore, in this light, you have a guidance in which to interpret the application of regulatory law at work and criminal law, and that's the kind of the masterful thing about it. But that's deliberate. And if you look at the whole history of the IHRA, its formulation, its process of adoption, and the way it's being used, that again, as you say, that's absolutely not accidental. That's become a key pillar. But it's not, and this is where some of my fellow activists get confused. It's not actually just about protecting Israel. It's about protecting the whole edifice of British and American imperialism and their policy in the Middle East. It's about protecting their right to loot the wealth of the world.
Thank you, Ranjeet. A lot of what you're saying resonates as you were speaking. I'm just thinking of the top context here at home and how the movement is managed. And when we ask why are we not making a difference, why haven't things changed? Well, it's not too dissimilar to what is happening in England, because it is being very much controlled and managed by approved revolutionaries or activists or anti-imperialists that are questionable their politics, Western Marxists maybe. I'd love to introduce you to Comrade Barry Murray of the Peadar O'Donnell Socialist Republican Forum. Barry, if you'd like to come in, because I'm conscious of time, maybe with a question or just an observation on anything that Ranjeet has said before we have about 10 minutes to wrap up.
An excellent presentation, Rajiv. It's doubtful if I can add anything to what you've said. I mean, you mentioned there just about, about the corporate think. The reality is that war, as you well know, and maybe everyone else mightn't just fully realize, but war is corporate think. That's what war's about. And it's now driven by the military-industrial complex at such a level. They're developing so much equipment, they're getting to test so much equipment, and then the technology war is at such a level now that it's frightening when you start to think about what they want to do. So, I mean, we think that we have the ability to just stop that in the morning. And that's not going to happen. You can put millions on the street if you want, but as you pointed out, you know, when the protests and when the major point for protest is over, unfortunately, the street's empty. And I think that you would know as well as anyone that more needs to be done in relation to consolidating what those type of demonstrations and those type of issues generate within the community. It's very hard to maintain, it's very hard to sustain street protests to the level that would threaten government. I mean, you would feel that they should have been threatened already, but it appears that's not just quite the case, although there's a lot of education within the population throughout the world taking place, and no doubt Arab governments and Western imperialist governments are feeling the pressure, and no doubt this can evolve down the road, but I think it definitely needs assistance and direction from people of your caliber and the caliber of any Marxist-Leninists that are anywhere in the world that can push this thing forward to a level whereby it sticks and whereby it stays, and where people start to realize, in particular, people begin to realize that they have power and that it is their business, that the running of countries and the running of their communities and the running of the world is the job of the majority in the world, that is the working class, and that they understand why they need to do that. That's central, because too many people sort of become emotionally involved and stuff, but they don't realize that they actually are the power, and the proof of that is that governments use them as their power all the time by default. So, you know, it's time that the likes of us sort of tried to harness that a bit more than we've already done. I mean, the left, I don't know about the left in England, but the left in Ireland is, you know,
Non-existent. I'll find the word for you.
I was going to say pathetic, but I mean, it's yeah, I mean, it's bad, you know. Then there's the oppression side of it. I mean, it has probably scared the thinkers within the various governments, this type of thing. They know they have went down a road that they're having terrible difficulty getting back out of. And the police, of course, are agents of the state. The police will do their bidding, and you know, when they came into your house and said they're only doing their job, they're not only doing their job. That's a coverall. That's a lie. Like, they're doing what the state tells them to do, and they know what the state's telling them to do: repress you, oppress you, jail you, intimidate you, kill you if they have to. So it's and I mean, they're supported in that by priests, clearly, by the church, and religions have always supported power. And power uses things like guilt and information omission. They use formal education to mold the citizen. They use the media, oppression, jail, and death, as I said, and anything else they can do. But the thing is that states and power, and the most thing that they fear is people having a voice, people coming together, and people beginning to organize, and that people begin to question the answers rather than answering the questions. I mean, I don't know if that's any help to anybody here. But
Thank you, Barry. No, it's always good to hear from you, Barry. Thank you. Ranjeet, there's 5 minutes left, and I know you have another program to attend to. You'll have a much wider audience, but you have a very captive audience here today, so thank you. Is there anything maybe that you feel, I suppose the question is that a lot of us are sitting here, we're very active, and many of us have the theoretical, or we're beginning to understand that there'll be no revolution without theory, and no, you know, that we must join the dots as well. Very interested, maybe burgeoning communists here. But what do you think we need to do, those of us who are aware of the controlled opposition, aware that the so-called anti-war movement is again being very managed. And, we're constantly being ostracized from our respective groups or pushed out or vilified as being, dangerous or too revolutionary. What do you think we can do here, those of us who are gathered and those who are watching maybe later on? What do we need to do?
Thanks, Barry. Thanks, Rosin. Really interesting points and lots of things that spring to my mind that I'll try not to say too in any lengthy way. I mean, I think, I, I love the fact that you guys are here and together. I don't think you're powerless. I don't think you have to accept. One, don't take it personally. Don't take it personally. What you're seeing is really a reflection of the class hatred of the bourgeoisie of the working class. You represent the finest elements of the working class. You represent the future. You represent freedom. You represent truth. These are your friends. And what the bourgeoisie fear is your voice, your local workers who understand geopolitics, who understand the local problems of other workers and have a solution. Don't be afraid to put the positive solution. I'm not going to tell you what to do. You know your country and your environment better than me, but the fact that you are coming together, you're a nascent and embryonic group, a party. It's difficult. We in Britain also, we're a very small party. We're with a small history, and yet we have something that's needed. And I think as we increasingly grow and organize, and we have more and more people all over the country with truly national organization, my vision is that we become the backbone of a wider movement. This big anti-imperialist movement is huge. The needs of the working class in the face of the crisis of imperialism are huge and pressing and urgent. Their opposition to the wars are so desperate that in order to continue to fight this horrible war they're waging against the Iranian people, with a temporary pause at the moment, they're currently engaged in a series of what are clearly false flag operations around Britain. There's been a firebombing of an empty ambulance here. There's been apparently a failed firebombing of a synagogue in Kenton where they broke one window and threw a bottle through it. But this is a national thing, which now means that we have to clamp down on the anti-Semitism. Why anti-Semitism? So the whole framework of fear they're creating, of mobilizing to war, they're going to start trying to recruit people into their armies, their armed services. We have to be, we have to learn from our enemies. It reminded me what you were saying, Barry, of Brigadier Frank Kitson. What do you want to do? If he's someone who obviously fought the emergency in Malaya, i.e., was involved in anti-communist suppression, fighting the national liberation struggle of the British colony of Malaysia. Now, he's someone who's deeply involved in fighting the Republican movement in Ireland as well. He said you had to break the connection between the communists and the people. Mao Zedong famously said that the party, the communists, the working class leaders are the fish and the people are the sea. And we have to again rediscover that tradition. We have a message which is loved and welcomed. Actually, when I first came to light in all these videos, saying, "Oh, he is a communist," we know he's a communist, but what he's saying is really good, and we really respect what he's doing. And look, he's so steadfast and he's so courageous, and doesn't mind being arrested, and everything he's saying, I totally agree with. He's a communist. So like, there's a dissonance between what people are told, this nonsense about communism equals mass death, slaughter, gulag archipelago. It's a fascist propaganda that's been made mainstream, and they did that, of course, by the CIA, by their mighty Wurlitzer, they literally had a project by the Carnegie Foundation called the Marxism-Leninism Project, in which they said, we need to develop this tool against Marxism-Leninism to inoculate the Western masses against Marxism. It will look like Marxism, sound like Marxism, but it will be anti-Marxist. So use Marx against Marx. It will disavow the class struggle. It will disavow actually existing communism. It will disavow the concept of revolution. It will tell you that, you just make social peace and you don't need to struggle. And it will ultimately, they wanted to really undo the concept of the ideological framework of dialectical and historical materialism. So fight actually existing socialism, fight the scientific theory of communism. And they've done that very effectively. We have to reinvent it, and we have to become, I think we're already in a position we can become the backbone of a struggle. I've got a comrade, Ash, very nice, he's a kind of a spiritualist. He's not a communist, but he's of Muslim origin, but he's not Muslim. But he's deeply committed to the pro-Palestine movement, and he's very interesting. He goes to people and he just decides you're a good person or you're a bad person. You're sincere or you're not sincere. and he kind of networks with everyone he considers to be a good person and sincere. And he's very effective. He's much more effective than me. I've learned a lot from him. Sometimes it's just necessary to realize these people are basically on our side, and we need to work with them over a long period of time. We need to go lower and deeper to the working people. We need to be with them. We need to be patient. We need to explain, and we need to find the people who are theoretically advanced. And that just really means their eyes are open, they're looking around, and they're open to the answers. And those people we need to bring together, or educate, study to become a more and more cohesive group. We're not going to be able to do this without really Marxist, Leninist, real communist parties, which reconnect with the mass. And we have to get back into that habit of not thinking of ourselves as ostracized and different. And, the oppression has to a little bit run off we're not being tortured in the dungeons of Netanyahu, The two polite policemen who don't know what they're doing come to my house, and you can, let's not make it something it's not, I'm not being tortured. I'm not being murdered. And yet, at my hospital, there was a Dr. Adnan, who was an orthopedic surgeon, who went back to Gaza, who was tortured and murdered in the Israeli dungeons, right? So it's the same system. It's a global system of slavery, but the rules are different here. They haven't yet quite got to the point where they've totally rescinded democracy because they're afraid to. They're afraid to. That's also our power. So we have to use this moment to spread our education everywhere, to bring forward good people, to be very solid, very courageous, and use this opportunity to build, because as they build towards war, you can bet there will be a time when they switch towards fascist coercion and repression. These are signs that they're moving in that direction. They're feeling out the way, but they are afraid. They're afraid of the power of the working people. We need to take this opportunity to be among them, to mobilize all the good people, to really reassert the traditions of the communist movement, which is a long and powerful tradition going back to the October Revolution and directly to us and all of you. Essentially it's a winning formula. The fact that our bourgeoisie bothered to oppress us, bothered to take these steps to stop me from working and operating on a few patients, to arrest me at my home time and time again, because they know it's a winning formula. But equally, it shows that they've got no answers, because what are they doing in this silly, it's almost performative arrests and persecution? They're doing the opposite of what they intend. They're not stifling the movement, they're growing it, they're spreading it. And as long as we just, maintain our calm, maintain our bearing, and maintain our purpose, I've got absolutely no doubt that we're going to become a force to be reckoned with in a very near future. And far more useful and interesting that we can meet and talk about our successes in struggle when we mobilize dockers to stop moving Israel's arms to Israel, when we mobilize our unions to throw off the controlled leadership and actually get them to engage in opposition to policies which are deeply antithetical to the interests of the British workers. So we have to pursue that line. We have to be positive in our action and not get defensive, and we just have to wave aside these pathetic acts. But we can use them to expose people like, for example, Wes Streeting. I've been involved in a campaign to try and get him ousted. I'm going to be involved in even legal campaigns sometimes against the IHRA definition. So we will get that definition kicked out. We will continue our campaign against it. We'll expose it. We'll get trade unions to disavow it. We will work to break the link between the Labour Party and the British workers. And then lots will happen. I'm not worried, even if they go, for the time being, they think that reform are going to do something for them. Reform will do nothing for them. That love affair will be broken very bloody quickly. But the love affair with Labour is 120 years old and needs to be thoroughly shattered if the British workers are going to have any independent political voice in life. So those are the things I'm really keen to push. I'm very encouraged by you guys' work. It's lovely to watch as I do on social media, and it's really good to be in contact with you. So thanks for inviting me, and good to speak to you today.
Thank you, Comrade Ranjeet Brar, for being with us this morning, for giving up your time so freely as well. We're really privileged to be in your company. We won't just follow you, Ranjeet, on social media and what you're doing. We will walk with you here, hand in hand as comrades, because there is no war but class war, and this is a class issue, and that's what we have in common, from Ireland to England to Scotland to Wales to all across Europe and all across the world. Thank you. We wish you good luck. Hope you get a few more days off work anyway, and that you
Thanks so
get all
much,
the
Rosen.
good jobs.
Can I say to you guys, Choki Allah, is that the right way to say it? Our day will come.
Yeah, or we will rise again. See you soon, Ranjeet.
Thanks,
Please
comrade.
come back. Thanks, everybody, and Ranjeet, all the best.
And you take care. Thanks again.
Thank you,
Slán.
comrades. Slán go forward.